Hello and welcome to Pathways to Profitability. This is part 2 of a 2-part session on wine list profitability specifically and how you can organize your wine list and your physical collateral to be a tool to gross profit. Now, in the beginning, we talked about some physical things you can do. Now I want to talk a little bit about the psychology that you can employ and the psychology of how people buy, because it's really, really important. So every wine list I've been a part of in terms of designing, and there have been over 40 of them, whether it is a tiny wine list with 20 or 30 wines, or whether it's a massive wine list with 3 or 4 or 5,000 wines, every wine list, every category, no matter how big or small that category is, I always include 3 key elements. They are steppers, compellers, and upper limit modifiers. So I'm going to talk about each one in brief just to give you an idea of the concepts and encourage you to employ these ideas in your categories. And again, it doesn't matter how big or small the categories are, this works across the board. So firstly, a stepper. A stepper is a way to get somebody into the next incremental price point. And typically speaking, about a 20% differential doesn't really affect a transaction very much. And if you want to think about that, if a glass of wine were $10 or $12, would that be the break point that makes you get it or not? Probably not. If a bottle of wine were $100 or $120, would that be the break point? Maybe, maybe not. If it were 50 or 60, would that really make a huge difference? Possibly. If it were, 500 or 600, no. 1,000 or 1,200, no, right? So roughly in the 20% and under range, that's about a good place to step up to your next increment. So a lot of times you'll look at a wine list and you'll see these massive jumps, right? There's no easy steps to climb up to the next thing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a guest is looking for a Chardonnay and their limit is $80. You might have a Chardonnay or two in the $40 and $50 range, and then let's say your next Chardonnay is $115, $120. Well, what do you think they're going to do? They're not going to go up. That's way too high. They're going to go down. And what could have been an $80 sale is a $40 or $50 or $60 sale, because that's all you had for them. Now, if you had steppers, something to break up that price point, it would be a little different. So maybe you go from $60 to $72 to $89 to $100. Now, in that reality, at their $80 price point, you can change the conversation from what is $80 or less to this $72, this $89 one, and this, $90-something one. Let's talk about the differences, because they're all relatively similarly priced. And then the conversation isn't about how much does this cost. The conversation then is about, let's talk about the style. And so you can recommend the one that's most perfect for them. And I always love to put things in terms of glasses. So if somebody's limit is $80 and I'm talking to them about a $95 bottle, I'll be like, listen, I want to respect your price ceiling of $80. I have some recommendations for you, but for the difference of about $3 per glass, because really $15 in a full bottle, five glasses to a bottle, right? It's $3 per glass. So I'll say, for the difference of about $3 per glass, this one I think is going to be a much better match, or a huge step up in quality or whatever. When you put it that way, there's a psychology at work there, because $15 more might sound like a lot, but $3 a glass, who wouldn't pay that, right? So that's one way that you can do it. And let me be clear, if you have a small program, it's not that you need to have 8 Chardonnays. It could be that you have 4 or 5 wines that are of similar body, or maybe 4 or 5 oaky whites, right? Oak exposed whites that you need to step up. They don't all have to be Chardonnays, but that's how you want to step it up. Or let's say you only have 4 or 5 wines from Portugal, right? Whatever those white wines are, you just want to have step-ups in the quality. I see so many times, and there are 2 sections that really are guilty of this more than anything, are rosés and New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs. Every rosé is $30 to $45. Obviously, there are exceptions. Same thing with New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs. I see programs with like 6 New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, and they're all between $40 and $50. It's like, what are you doing? You're just cannibalizing those sales. And for the people that want to spend more in that category, you are leaving money on the table if you don't have steppers to take them to the next level. Okay, next, compellers. Compellers are key, and they work in conjunction with steppers. A compeller is a wine that you take potentially a lower margin for. Ideally, you don't take a lower margin, but you get it at such a great price that you can sell it for less than your competitive set does, so that you not only look like, but you are providing a great value. You're taking more margin and you're compelling the sale. So let's use this $80 Chardonnay situation. Let's say their ceiling is $80, but at $100, I have a Chardonnay that they recognize everywhere else is $130 or $140 or $150. They're going to be compelled to break their ceiling because of the psychological value that's there, right? It might be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this thing I know to be so expensive is only this much. Let's give an example with cars, right? A Ferrari for $40,000 is a really compelling deal. Now, that might be too expensive for some, but a $100,000 car that's known to be a $100,000 car for only $40,000, that's pretty compelling. And if somebody's car budget was $35,000, but they knew for $5,000 more they could get a Ferrari, maybe they might make that move. So that's a really important thing to understand is those compellers. And really with compellers, you're looking at more popular, more recognizable wines, categories, or brands, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, because you can also say in the course of this conversation, hey, you might not be familiar with this wine, but should be about $130, $140 a bottle, but I have it on the list for $100 because I love it so much. I'm so excited about it. I'm so passionate about it. Or your staff could say, the Somm has it on the list at this price because they're so excited. We wanted to give it to you as a gift. I'll give you a great example of that with something that might resonate popularly. I have sold a lot of Krug by the glass at $45 a glass. Now, if you think about the fact that that's not really a good margin, that's true, but the gross dollars, the gross revenue, $45 a glass for Krug is much more value to my operation than gross revenue of $22 or $23 a glass for something else. But the reason I can sell so much Krug at $45 a glass is because we can tell our guests, listen, this should be $70, $80, $90 a glass, but we love it so much and we feel everybody deserves to try something extraordinary. Everybody deserves that luxury. So as a gift for you, we have it at this compelling price. And let me tell you, that has moved the needle so much, and that puts a lot of gross revenue, because gross revenue is really important as well. And you have a blended product mix where you can account for those compellers that are maybe at a lower margin with some other things that have no competitive set that you're selling at a higher margin. Lastly, upper limit modifiers. These serve two functions. First and foremost, you can't sell it if you don't have it. An upper limit modifier is the most expensive wine with the category. So let's say Chardonnay. Let's say there's a $600 Burgundy on the list. Well, I don't necessarily have that on the list to sell it, but for the 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 times a year that it does sell, that's $600 of revenue. And whatever the gross profit is, even if it's at a high cost of goods, it's a lot of gross profit dollars because you don't put percentage points in the bank. But the reason that $600 bottle of Burgundy might be there is to make the $350 bottle of Chardonnay a little bit more appealing, right? So we're modifying the upper limit so it's easier to recommend that $350 bottle where appropriate without a guest feeling like, oh, they're just going for the most expensive wine. But also, if I didn't have that $600 bottle, the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a year when it sells, I wouldn't have made $600. I would have only made $350. Less gross profit, less gross revenue. Also, that $600 bottle of Chardonnay, again in this example, should also be a compeller. It should be something that everywhere else should be $700, $800, $900 because that calibrates your entire list as being such a great value. And then what that does is it compels people to spend more. My $80 Chardonnay drinker sees an $800 bottle of Chardonnay on the list for $600, realizes, wow, everything's such a great deal. Maybe I should move my limit up to 100 or 110 because I recognize that this is such a compelling deal. That means everything on the program is such a great price. So those are 3 points of psychology that no matter how big or small your wine program is, no matter how broad or small your category is, whether you have 3 Chardonnays or 300 Chardonnays, or whatever, you can use to absolutely generate revenue and to move people comfortably into a place where they spend more money more happily. So you're not selling, you're not gouging, you're not looking at them as a wallet. You're looking at them as an experience, and you're helping guide their experience into a higher margin, higher revenue, higher profit item. And that's all it takes, just a little psychology.